Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Certified Residential Opportunities Administrative Memorandum Training for Provider of Residential Services. My name is Alexis Harrington. I'm the Associate Commissioner for Service Access and Program Implementation within the Division of Service Access, Program Implementation, and Stakeholder Support. I'm joined by several members of the team who are eagerly excited to present today's material, including Anne-Marie Peterson, Associate Commissioner for the Regional Field Offices, Delia Tucker, the Statewide Operations Director for the Regional Field Office, and last but not least, Cindy Smolkukla, Statewide Certified Residential Opportunities Coordinator. We are also joined by Aviva Kindo today, our Deputy Commissioner for the Division of Service Access, Program Implementation, and Stakeholder Support. Before we begin with today's agenda, I'd like to provide a bit of background information on the work that has happened behind the scenes. In 2021, we held a series of meetings with provider association reps and some of their members highlighting challenges related to the CRO process. The discussion led to a work group with representation from the 9 provider association groups, as well as the CCO. We held several meetings talking through some key areas of concerns that will be highlighted in today's training. In addition to meeting with the providers, we've also engaged individuals, families, and other key stakeholders leading to the ADM and the adopted regulation. Next slide. All right, so as I stated in opening remarks, the purpose of today's training is to provide an overview of the Certified Residential Opportunity process, the adopted regulation, the ADM governing the process in key areas within the ADM impacting residential providers, sorry about that. And we will discuss and introduce the participants to the capacity management application and discuss the 3-phase rollout plan. Next slide. There are 5 key elements which are integral to the ADM and really drive its purpose. It's transparency in the process, clarification of the rules that are consistently applied across regions and across individuals presenting with similar circumstances, which leads to equity and the ability to sustain a critical resource that should be available for those who require a certified level of care. Next slide. All right. So moving along to the regulations. So OPWDD adopted regulations governing the admission to and the provision of services in residential facilities certified or operated by OPWDD on June 14th of 2023. The ADM that we're going to cover today further clarifies the requirements contained in those regulations. All right, and then in terms of the most critical components of those regulations, we really want to ensure that folks understand the most integrated and least restrictive housing options are explored. And then next slide, please.
Could I just interrupt for a second and wanted to tell the audience if you have a question or concern, please put that in the chat as well.
Thank you. We forgot to cover housekeeping. So great timing. Was there anything else, Cindy, that we want to cover?
No, and we'll be answering the questions that we can throughout the training, and for those that we don't get to, we will be gathering for a FAQ subsequent to the training today.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So additionally, providers of care management and the residential agencies must partner with OPWDD to facilitate the provision of residential services to individuals when appropriate. So the short response is we all do the right thing, but we also do what we do because it is the law too. So next slide. All right, so we also wanted to take a moment to cover all of the people and entities that are involved in the CRO process. So first is the person who is looking for and desires certified housing. Additionally, their family members of their circle of support are involved in helping them as well. Then we've got care managers and the care coordination organizations who are critically involved in gathering information, updating life plans for submission of referral packets, assisting coordinating and screening with interested providers, giving updates to the individuals and families on status and activities pertaining to the placement process, coordinating and applying for alternative services while placement options are explored. Then we've got all of you, our residential providers, who are involved in attending and participating in AROC presentations. Those are the Access to Residential Opportunities Committee, providing accurate descriptions of each residence, and prioritizing screening of people in emergency need. And then lastly, we've got OPWDD through the Regional Field Office's Certified Housing Team, and they are responsible for administration and oversight of the CRO process to ensure consistency and equity of this important resource to those with the greatest need. All right, so before we get into the details of the changes that are going to be taking place, we wanted to provide some clarity for you all. So the changes that are taking place can be categorized into three major buckets. First, our change to guidance, and this includes the regs, ADMs, or memos outlining instruction to the field. That is going to be indicated with this little sign with the check boxes on a piece of paper. You may have noticed that symbol was on the regulation slide. Then we've got change to process, which is based on regulations or guidance, our internal processes that have been modified. And then lastly, we've got a change to timeframes, and those are the timeframes in which we complete our process. So anything on, any of these symbols could be on our slides. The process slide symbol with the circles and the arrows, anytime you see that on a slide, that means that there has been a change to process. Anytime you see the clock, that means that there has been a change in time frame. And I will say that there are some slides that have multiple symbols on them, meaning that there could be process and time frame changes. And then with the changes that are occurring, the most important thing that is staying the same is you. You are continuing to have the same roles and responsibilities, but we will cover some of the changes, as I mentioned before, related to guidance, process, and time frame. All right, so.
I get a question that they're not able to see the slides. Just want to double check that we are.
All right, so we're getting some feedback that you might not be able to see the slides. We can see them on our end. Could somebody just indicate in the Q&A whether or not you can see the slides?
Okay.
You can see them. Perfect, perfect. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. So thank you all. We appreciate the emojis too. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay. So what is really important to highlight before we dive really deep into walking through each section of the ADM is highlighting what is staying the same and what is changing within this ADM. So what's staying the same? We're having CRO referral packets. They're getting updated with significant changes. Our AROC meetings are still happening at least monthly, where the priority cases are reviewed. We continue to utilize emergency need, substantial need, and current need for designation levels. DDP2 is still required, and we will still have targeted referrals. In terms of changes, so we are going to have the referral packets updated annually in addition to significant updates to a person. The definition of these designation levels may be changed slightly, but we are still using EN, SN, CN. We've got dispute resolution extending to 30 days, which we'll cover in more detail later on. Our request for approval to fill has been modified. Our screening form has been modified. Our vacancy announcement has been modified, which we're very excited about. That includes indicating if there is a vacancy viable or not, so that we have a more adequate understanding of our footprint out there and resources available. And then we also have modified the site profile form, which will be provided for every certified location. All right, so moving along. So you may have seen the ADM already, I hope so. If you have, these are all of the 10 sections that are highlighted throughout the ADM. How we structured our presentation today is to literally walk through each of these to let you know how that impacts you as a residential provider. And we will be spending most of the training within Section 7. That is the key area that impacts each of you as providers. Next slide. And now I'll turn it over to Delia.
Thank you, Alexis. Okay, so we're going to cover Section 1, which is the overview. We'll start with the next slide. Okay, and here you have a nice visual. So over the next couple of slides, we're going to go through some of the specific sections of the CRO ADM, as Alexis mentioned. We'll start with Section 1, and Section 1 really focuses on the partners that are involved in the CRO process. And these are, you know, as we mentioned before, the regional field office certified housing teams, the residential providers and care managers. And it's important to note that the CRO process is really designed to help facilitate a system that's really sustainable and equitable. And it allows access to residential supports for those that are in greatest need. The process also ensures that the least restrictive and most integrated options are explored, so that way people can utilize those supports prior to seeking certified housing. The Regional Field Office Certified Housing Team is responsible for the administration and oversight of the CRO process to ensure consistency and equity. And, you know, as you know, the certified housing teams work with people seeking residential services, their families, their support systems. They work with residential providers and referral sources to really ensure that the referral sources are provided and they're up-to-date information. And they also are responsible for keeping residential referral packets current and active. They maintain the current information and update it in the capacity management database as well. Residential providers as well, they're another partner in the process, and they must work collaboratively with the certified housing team in their regions, and they will be managing existing and future residential capacity. They would provide accurate site profiles of their certified residential facilities, and providers also will be verifying their current vacancies in their programs to the certified housing team. So each of these entities work closely in a manner that aligns with OPWDD's mission and commitment to support personal choice and community integration. Next slide. Okay, so I'd like to spend some time now explaining how we go about ensuring that the most integrated supports are explored prior to pursuing certified residential. Everyone has an active role as it pertains to exploring the most integrated settings, and yes, mainly it's the care manager working with the person or their family. However, residential providers must also ask those challenging questions. You know, should this person be living in a less restrictive, more independent setting? Providers should be evaluating and reevaluating people to see if they can move on to a more independent setting. And it really starts with understanding the person's housing needs and what supports are needed to ensure the most integrated living environment. The housing need obviously must be referenced in the person's life plan. And through the person-centered planning process and engagement of the circle of support and the care manager, they must explore the most integrated and least restrictive options to accommodate the person's need. So you can see in this hierarchy chart that it flows from natural supports to community supports. If those are not successful, it's appropriate to explore OPWDD non-waiver supports in addition to community and natural supports. And within the hierarchy, the most integrated supports and services, such as the Medicaid state plan, can be explored, followed by a variety of HCBS waiver services. In the event that these combined resources prove unsuccessful in actually meeting that person's needs, their housing needs, a CRO referral may be pursued. So there's a lot to unpack here, so let's take a deeper look at this. So when we explore more integrated solutions, we see some pretty amazing outcomes for people. We see enhanced relationships and increased inclusion and belonging. A person's interests, knowledge, and hobbies also grow with more relationship and integration, and they begin to see and experience more. They build social capital within their communities. Learning within natural settings with the primary reinforcer have the greatest impact. This leads to independence, self-reliance, growth, and more confidence. Having these experiences really truly allows a person choice. Offering and exploring these options also allows a person to make informed choices and explore dignity of risk, which all lead to belonging and feeling as a productive member of the community. Those are foundational principles of OPWDD and why Section 1 emphasizes its importance of exploring the most integrated supports and services for people with IDD prior to seeking certified housing. And now we'll conclude Section 1 discussing the Access to Residential Opportunities Committee. So AROC, as you all know it, their meetings occur at least monthly and are held in the form and format that best meets the area's needs. So the meetings may be held more frequently and, as deemed appropriate by the regional field office. So the people who are presented at AROC are those with an increased need for residential opportunities. And the meeting really gives the person or their advocate a chance to educate providers on who the person is. Several different people may present at AROC. It could be the person themselves, a family member, a care manager, or a social worker. Providers are encouraged to participate by asking questions to clarify information and questions that may give you more information about who the person truly is. And now we'll move on to Section 2, and Cindy will take that over.
Hello, everyone. I will review Section 2 of the CRO ADM and all their subsections. Next slide, please. What you see in front of you is really a breakdown of the CRO ADM Section 2, the tasks that are involved in the CRO process, and it also represents the parties that are greatly involved in the process. So let's look at the first quadrant. This is subsection 1 of the CRO ADM, and it goes over the CRO referral criteria. The ADM clearly outlines that less restrictive supports and services must be explored before submitting a CRO referral. The person and their family, the care manager, are the parties most impacted in this section. With the CRO ADM, all the CRO forms have been revised, including the H005 form, the CRO referral form. The revised form does not require the family or the person to sign. Instead, the care manager or the OPWDD specialty liaison prints their name and attests that they have explained the CRO process to the person or family. In subsection 2 of the ADM, it outlines those elements that must be reviewed before submitting the CRO referral. This impacts the care manager, the OPWDD specialty liaison, and the residential provider if a person lives in an ICF. Next quarter represents subsection 3 in section 2 of the CRO ADM. It contains a detailed description of what is considered a comprehensive complete referral packet. Care managers and OPWDD specialty liaisons would be most interested in this section unless a person is in an ICF. Then it is the residential provider that would rely on this information in the ADM. Now we are on subsection 4, where the ADM outlines the steps that a certified housing team completes when reviewing a new CRO referral packet. Next slide. We kind of quickly do an overview of comparing the old process from the protocol that we had in 2015 to the CRO ADM. So the enhancement in the CRO process with the CRO ADM will impact and improve everybody's duties. Let's take a quick look at the difference between 2015 protocol and the CRO ADM. The revised H005 referral form has many new questions that give the person the chance to share a lot of valuable information about themselves. This can only aid you, the residential provider, when considering vacancies. The revised H004 form, the notification of need level, that just contains more information, which is always very helpful. We are now initiating the NOD process for CRO. It is the NOD 15 is the form. The person, by issuing the NOD 15, the person will have a definite yes or no when requesting certified settings. Consequently, if they disagree with the certified housing team's determination, there is a formalized appeal process. Next is the CRO ADM requirement for assessments to be complete and current in order to be considered for CRO. The CRO ADM does not require that these assessments are to be included in the referral packet, but it does require that it is complete and current. The CRO ADM speaks on the life plan being current and included in the referral packet, which has been a standard for some time now. But the difference is that the ADM drills down to include the current life plan with the signed page needing to be included in the referral packet. Last but not least, the CRO ADM has expanded the interpretation of each need level, the emergency need, the substantial need, and the current need. We will review those levels later on in the presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, what is in a complete CRO packet? It has changed slightly due to the ADM. Of course, you have a complete referral form, the H005 form, a current physical, which is 365 days from the prior exam, a psychological report that reflects a person's current functioning. This report can be 6 months old, it can be 2 years old, possibly even 10 years old, as long as it represents the person's current functioning. The DDP-2 needs to be current within 2 years. What is changing is the need to submit the signed page of the current life plan. And if a life plan is not available, then there needs to be some type of treatment plan that's included in the CRO packet. Another new element of the CRO process is the requirement of the CAS or the CANS being completed and current. The CRO referral will not be reviewed until one of those assessments are completed. These assessments are used to determine if a certified setting is deemed appropriate. As always, the DDP-2 and now the CAS or the CANS will not be included in the CRO packet that you will receive for the use of the screening process. Next slide. Okay, optional documents. Here's a list of all the documents that could be included in the CRO referral packet. when a person is applying for supports and services. More of these documents would be included in a CRO packet if the person is being considered for an opportunity in an ICF or leaving an ICF. For example, if in the recent past a person has been involved in the criminal justice system, it is likely that there will be a risk assessment or a risk management plan included in the CRO packet. Next slide, please. It didn't change.
On my end.
Oh, there it goes. Sorry, guys, my computer was just a little bit slow. Okay, so on this slide, you will see all the forms, and we've kind of separated them out for the forms that are highly involved with the CCOs, care managers, specialty liaisons, and then forms that are specific to you, the residential providers. As we said before, all the forms have been updated to include much more information, and that will impact everyone. It is the expectation that all providers use the revised CRO forms that are attached to the CRO ADM beginning March, actually specifically March 3rd of this year, 2025. This information is, if information is submitted on the older forms, the regional field office will ask you to resubmit on the revised forms. Next slide, Alexis.
Thank you. And so we did see that there were some questions about reviewing the forms. Guess what? We will totally be pulling them up on our screen when we get to that section. So fear not, you will see them in real time with us, and we'll walk through that. All right, so this next section will discuss and define the criteria for the 3 residential support categories. Next slide. So the residential support categories are driven by the circumstances of the individual and or that of their caregiver when determinations regarding a certified level of care are made. As we've stated, there are 3 residential support categories which are defined in our HCBS waiver. Those are emergency need, substantial need, and current need. Next slide. All right, so consistent with the definition contained in the 2015 protocol, the EN category includes individuals who are in imminent risk of health and safety to self or others, have no permanent place to live, and circumstances where the primary caregiver is incapacitated. In the current ADM, we've expanded this category to also include people who are ready for discharge from institutional settings, including residential school students in their graduating year without a placement opportunity. We've also added Willowbrook class members whose current homes may be closing or interested in moving to a less restrictive environment or setting. Next slide. The substantial need category includes circumstances where the person is at increased risk of having no permanent place to live and or a person's family or caregivers are becoming increasingly unable to continue to provide care to manage the person's needs. In the recently issued ADM, you will see that we've expanded this category to also include those in ineligible settings seeking community placement but are not yet ready for discharge, and those in transitional settings seeking an OPWDD residential service but not ready for discharge. Example would be the Comprehensive Adult Transitional Houses, or as we love our acronyms, CAF. Next slide. All right, so the current need category includes circumstances where the person has an identified need for certified residential services and is ready to actively seek a residential opportunity and not meet the criteria to be designated as having emergency need or substantial need. The same definitions apply in the ADM, but similar to the other 2 categories, we've expanded the current need designation to include people in a residential school or placed by the Administration for Children's Services, ACS, with another planned permanent living arrangement, APLA, goal, which defines housing as a permanency planning goal, and are 16 years old or older without an adult placement and have not graduated. All right, next slide. All right. So, when people reside within ineligible settings and a care coordination organization is not established with a person, the Regional Field Office Specialty Liaison will work with the ineligible setting, the person and their family until a CCO is identified and enrollment specialist is assigned. The Regional Field Office has several types of specialty liaisons to assist depending on the setting the person currently resides in. They are our residential school transition coordinators. They support those who are coming from any residential school, our certified residential project home, or children's residential project home, CRPs, our RTS, we've got all that spelled out for you, and those who are supported by ACS in New York City. We've also got our forensic liaisons who support those coming from jails, prisons, correctional and secure facilities, and our ITOs in Sunmount and Shenango County and Broome, and our nursing home liaisons. They work with those in nursing homes, including rehab beyond 90 days and within assisted living. What's also important to know is that we are expecting, as these transitions get closer to discharge, within 3 months that the CCO and that enrollment specialist are actively engaged in assisting with the waiver application and other documentation. And then when it comes to the residential providers, we would be expecting you to partner with the OPWDD specialty liaison and the CCO to develop a plan for supports and services. Next slide. We cover the rest of our specialty liaisons. So we also have children's liaisons who work with those in foster care outside of ACS, which is in New York City, and those children with medical fragility in the children's waiver. We've got the crisis mitigation liaison who supports those in hospitals coming from the ETU, or extended treatment unit in Queens, the OLV, Our Lady of Victory out in Region 1, and specialty liaisons. Specialty hospitals. We're talking about the specialty liaisons. And then we also have our housing liaisons who work with our residential providers for individuals in community ICFs, including the state-operated CAF that we had talked about previously. All that I said on the previous slide still applies related to the CCO stepping in and supporting 3 months prior to discharge. And again, the residential providers are partnering with the OPWDD specialty liaisons and the CCOs to develop a plan for supports and services. So now I will switch it back over to Cindy.
So it's me again. I'm going to review Section 5 of the CRO ADM that talks on out-of-district statewide referrals. Okay, there are 2 main reasons that referrals are sent to residential providers outside of a person's home region. 1, the person may request it, and 2, it would be just out of the discretion, let's start over. It is the discretion of the regional certified housing team that would make the determination to send a referral statewide. Due to the complexity of the statewide referral, the certified housing team does not make the decision for this type of referral lightly. The team will evaluate the urgency of finding an opportunity and the local resources that are available. It is the determination, if it is determined by the local certified housing team that opportunities are in the preferential counties are not likely to become available in a reasonable period of time, the decision to expand the search will be made. Next slide. Okay, I love this graphic. It outlines the process that a referral goes through when the referral goes out of the home region. There are two important elements here for your consideration. You, the provider, will continue to communicate with your corresponding regional field office. You will not have to connect and collaborate with any other certified housing team. And two, you will continue to be contacted by care managers. However, you might be working with a CCO that's outside of your region that you have not worked with prior. And communicating with a care manager is really to assist you in coordinating a screening meeting with the individual. Next slide, and Delia will take over.
Thanks, Cindy. Okay, so for Section 6, this really covers any changes or updates, all the types of reporting that residential providers need to make to the certified housing team. So let's move on to the next slide. And here we'll take a look at how to manage any changes in circumstance that may impact a person's designated residential support category. So care managers, providers are expected to notify the certified housing team in writing by updating the residential referral packet. This also applies to providers who operate ICFs for individuals they're submitting CRO applications for. And the certified housing team will review the updates and adjust the person's designated residential support category if appropriate, based on the information in the updated referral packet. So there are two types of cadence when referral updates may occur: annually and when there's a significant change in circumstance for the person seeking housing. So as stated, annually, at the time of the person's life plan, the CRO referrals must be updated with the current information in order to remain active for screening and target referrals. That is going to require the care manager to review the current H005 on file and update any changes, and also attest that they've reviewed the CRO process with the person and their families or their circle of support, including the need to share the life plan and the packet on file. It will require submission of the new or current signed life plan, their current physical that is less than a year old, and a psychological that is reflective of the person's current state. The care manager can just submit the packet to keep the current status, or if significant updates have been made, can ask that the designation category be reevaluated. Upon receipt, the Regional Field Office Housing Liaison will review to make sure that it's current. If a request for review of the designation category has been made, this will be reevaluated and a new H004 will be sent. Additionally, anytime there's a significant change in circumstance, the same updated information should be submitted to the Regional Field Office Certified Housing Team, and a determination on the designation status will be made, as well as a new H00 form will be sent out to the care manager of the Certified Housing Team's designation.
Before we go to the next slide, I just wanted to highlight for those providers out there with ICF, right? This information would be your responsibility. Your QIDPs would, or who you have designed to submit the updated CRO referral packets or a CRO referral packet if they want to move to a less restrictive setting, like an IRA, you would be the ones doing the same work. So you would have to, you wouldn't have a life plan, right? You would have a CFA, but you would need to have your, the most current CFA that you have for them, and it should be within the past year. You would need to submit their physical that's within the past year, and any other specialty reports, like VSP, et cetera. So you would be you would be submitting those that Cindy went over for, an initial packet, and then annually. Again, with someone in an ICF, if you felt their circumstances, significantly changed, and it could change their designation, you would be expected to send those updates, and annually you would have to make these updates. So I just want to highlight that for providers that have ICF, this is something that you will be responsible, because there is no care coordination organization. And you will work with our housing liaisons, which I believe Alexis spoke to earlier.
Thanks, Anne Marie. That's an important distinction, so I'm glad that you pointed that out. Okay, so I think we're ready for a break. We will be taking 10 minutes, so please let's stick to that, and we'll see you in 10 minutes.
That'll be 10:55.
Zoom.
Thank you.
Who's advancing this one?
All right, so, welcome back. As, Alexis said, earlier, Section 7 is, has a lot of information that pertains to our residential providers. We're covering all the elements about managing residential service opportunities, and this is really the nuts and bolts of what all of you do, as certified residential providers in regards to placing individuals that are in need of it. So we'll get right into it. There's a lot to cover, so we'll just pivot to the next slide. So within Section 7, we'll cover key areas. I want to go through them for a moment. The first is the site profile. As mentioned earlier in the presentation, this form has changed, and we will review those changes and the expectations around it for when they need to be completed. We will discuss and review expectations around vacancy announcements. Again, this form has been modified, as well as when they need to be completed, and we'll cover that in a little bit. We'll also review internal moves, and we've combined, the internal move form that was historic, that you use right today, that has been combined with the request to fill form. And so we did that really to simplify the process, as well as to address some of the changes in the pro-ADM's expectations. So we'll discuss those stages of when internal move requires our approval, OPWDD's approval, versus when an internal move only requires OPWDD notification, and that's pretty significant. So we'll get into that. We'll spend some time reviewing the roles and responsibility of you as residential providers when it comes to screening people on the designation list. And for clarity, those designation lists are emergency need, substantial need, and current needs, which I think Alexis went over earlier in the training. In addition to the roles and responsibilities, we'll discuss how to flow between categories, right? How do you move and screen people from substantial needs, transition from emergency need to substantial need, and from some substantial need to current need. We'll review the admission process, which includes the request to fill and due process notifications. And then lastly, we'll spend some time discussing the responsibilities of both the residential providers and care managers' roles in resolving concerns that a person has with their current living arrangements. So can we pivot to the next slide? Thank you. So this slide highlights some of the changes with the pro-ADM. As I mentioned, all the forms have been modified, and we will be pulling them off, so we'll walk right through them. But these new forms, I know this was mentioned earlier, but I want to emphasize it. They begin, they are required to be utilized beginning Monday, March 3rd, 2025, right? So we issued the ADM in December. We're providing this training today. We know you're going to be taking this training back and reviewing the ADM again. So we want to give you time to really, let what we're saying here really resonate and have understanding, and so, that's why we gave, the effective date a little bit into the future, so it's March 3rd that these new forms need to be used. But in addition to utilizing the new forms, the CRO ADM, the requirements within the CRO ADM will also, we'll talk about them and the timeline to do so, right? So the first thing is site profiles, otherwise known as the H007, has been modified to align with the referral form, the H005, that's completed on behalf of the person, right? So typically that's the care managers that do the H005, but providers will do it if they are an ICF provider. The H007 and the H005 have really been coordinated so that they match. This form must be completed for all certified residential homes in the provider's portfolio. So the site profile has to be completed for every certified home you have. A site profile needs to be complete. And that, that's if a home carries an OPSERT, you should be noting that you need to complete the site profile. We'll discuss the rollout to obtain site profiles in upcoming slides, but if a new residential site comes online, or if characteristics of a certified home changes or is modified, the site profile should be updated within 5 days. Again, this is due to the correlation with the home's characteristics and that of the referral form of the people. And if not updated, it may result in you needing to screen people unnecessarily, because this is a matching. This will be how we match people to opportunities. So if your site profile is not reflective of its characteristics, you may get screenings that don't work, and we don't want to waste your time. We want your time and screenings to be meaningful, all right? So then the next thing is the vacancy announcement form, and this is required for all vacancies, regardless of if the vacancy is viable and regardless if a provider intends to fill. It doesn't matter. If you have a vacancy, you need to complete a vacancy announcement. And we'll discuss the reason behind that. So every vacancy in a provider certified residential portfolio requires a vacancy announcement to be completed. Again, we'll discuss the rollout and how we're going to obtain all these vacancy announcements in the upcoming slides. But completing of a vacancy announcement, we can have a greater understanding not only of those that are immediately viable to be filled, but what are the barriers to be filled. And when we go through that form, this will become make more sense. But we really want to understand, what is viable and what is not viable, and then what are the barriers or the reasons behind it not being viable. And that's really so we can collaboratively look at solutions, both of you as a provider and strategically as a system, right? So as with the site profiles, when a vacancy occurs, a provider has 5 days to complete the vacancy announcement. The new vacancy announcement form with the others, as the others were discussed, go into effect like every other one on March 3rd, 2025. So lastly, the screening reports has to be modified as previously discussed. And with the other forms, timelines for both completion of the screening itself and submission of the screening report is outlined in the CRO ADM. Providers will have 2 weeks for a targeted referral being sent, or 14 days to complete the screening referral, and then another 14 days to submit the referral to the regional field office. So this equates to a total of 28 days for a screening report to be done and submitted to the regional field office. As previously discussed, providers will only receive targeted referrals for active CRO packets, and active means current and updated, right? An active CRO packet, and the reason for that is really based on the feedback that all of you gave about that, the packets being outdated, and it's really hard to make a determination if you can support them. So we made this modification to the CRO ADM based on your feedback. So let's take a little deeper look in what I just covered, because that was a lot of information. We can go to the next slide. And we'll start with the site profile. But before I open up and share the form with you, I want to remind you, and you're going to hear me say this because dates are important. This form that we're going to be reviewing right now goes into effect on March 3rd. And our goal is by the June 2025 that all residential providers should have submitted the site profile for their certified sites in the regional office, right? So we're giving you, 4 months, all of March, all of April, all of May, and all of June to complete this form. Okay, so let's look at the form and what has changed. Can you pull that up for me?
Sure can.
When you guys get this PowerPoint, the really cool thing is that it links right to the form, so you'll like that. So the first thing the form asks for is to identify if this is initial site profile or an updated one. Because this is a new form and you'll have 4 months to do that, all of these will be initials when you first do it. But then again, as I mentioned, if anything changes significantly with the home characteristics, you can update a new one. Again, they'll all be submitted within by June 2025, June 30th. If the site profile is modified in any way, not only do we want it updated, but within 5 days of the change. Next would be the date, the form of completing the form. You would note that the date that you're completing it. When we get to our capacity management application, that'll be automated, right, in the system, as well as the information that you previously submitted on the site would automatically be pulled in. Look for your first ones, you'll be including your agency name should be noted on the form, followed by the relative op cert that is describing the house, right? So you need to know the op certification of the home and the actual address of the home. That's really important. Many of you probably know that you have certain names to describe your homes, and that's not always correlates with the address or with the op cert. So from our perspective, having the op cert and the actual address is critically important. We like to have, you'll need to have the staff that's completing the form, their phone number and email address, in case we have any questions, right? And then the next item to be completed is the description of the home, and this includes the home capacity, right? So we want to know what's the capacity, and that's related to your op cert. The number of bedrooms, right? If any of the capacity beds are tub beds, and tubs means temporary use beds, we like to know that because they are not utilized when matching, right, if it's a tub vacancy. If this is a gender-specific home, we like to know this, and this is a drop-down field. We want to know the type of community the home is located, and we provide definitions of community. We describe city, suburban, and rural to assist you in completing it. We also ask for the number of floors to the home, and if there are stairs to enter the home. There's information on what type of vehicles are available to the home, and you can check multiple fields here. We like to know all the vehicles that you have used for that particular site. Knowing what type of public transportation, if any, is available is also important, and you have a multi-select option there as well. So the makeup of the home is very important, and so is the age range or the majority of people that live in the home is useful. This is not all-encompassing. We use a drop-down. We know there can be outliers, like you may have a home that is primarily 18 to 40, but you have one person that's living there that's much older. You would select the 18 to 40 age range, right? So we do have them in selections. There's 18 to 40, 41 to 64 years of age, and then 65 years and older. And this is, general selection. You might have some people that are younger, right? And again, you would choose the one that is more closely with that group. We ask additional residential descriptions or considerations that the home may be able to provide. Those include, like, if pets are available to be part of the home, if there is specific dietary needs can be accommodated, and is the kitchen secured? Is it barrier-free and environmentally accessible? These are questions about environmental modifications available in the homes. We like to know if there's special showers, tubs, lifts, or sensory accommodations. And we provide a variety to select, as well as space to type in additional information that's not listed. The form goes on to inquire about if the yard is fenced, if there are alarms on external doors, if there's delayed egress capabilities. We asked about clinical tools, such as is there a timeout room or a quiet room? If they are, will they need to be identified? You know, and timeout rooms are very specific to regulation, right? And so, you know, just noting that. Then on page 3 of the form, we get into asking what nursing supports that are available that exceed standard level of a certified site. So if there is, we ask for you to specify through the drop-down feature, and those include having, you know, nursing availability on site for 8 hours of a day or more, 12-hour days, 16-hour days, or 24-hour nursing available on site, right? We would like to know that. And that, again, aligns with the H005 if people have those needs. Any additional clinical support is also requested, and understanding if the staff in that house are trained in SCIP or restrictive techniques, or if you do promote, if they have training beyond promote level 1. And then lastly, we inquire about the fire evacuation information for the home, you know, and their life safety certified prompting level. So we ask if it's a 3-minute evac, an 8-minute, 13-minute, or an impractical. And we also like to know if the home is sprinkler system or not. We allow, you know, additional details and comments for you to add. And until our capacity management application is active for providers, this form will be submitted through our CRO mailboxes for the respective regions. And lastly, I just want to, we can go back to the slides. Again, we'll be giving providers 4 months beginning March 3rd through June 30th to complete these site profiles for their entire residential portfolio. All right, I'm going to take a sip of water, and we'll go to the next slide. Give me a moment.
That was a lot.
That was a lot. So now we're moving to vacancy announcement forms and that process. And as stated previously, vacancy announcements are required for all vacancy, regardless if the vacancy is viable or not, and regardless of if the provider intends to fill. Every vacancy in a provider's certified residential portfolio requires a vacancy announcement to be completed. And the need to complete a vacancy announcement for all, again, begins on March 3rd, 2025. And so any new vacancy that comes into existence after March 3rd, 2025 needs to be submitted within 5 days of the vacancy becoming available. So let's take a look at the vacancy announcement form, or as we like to call it, the H006. So let me see, do we have that up? Okay, great. Similar to the site profile, the date of the vacancy announcement, the form is being completed needs to be noted on the form, the agency name, the street address, including the city, state, zip, county needs to be recorded for each vacancy, the operating certificate number needs to be recorded, and the date the vacancy becomes available. And so sometimes we have anticipated vacancies, so, you know, it would be the, you know, you put the date that it would become available, and that's important. And then the type of vacancy, right? And this is a drop down with options. Community residences are noted there, family care is noted there, supervised or supportive IRAs, ICFs are noted there in the drop down, both for voluntary and state operation. The next component of the form is the contact information of the residents, including, like the name of the person at the house, phone number and email that we can contact if we have questions. On the vacancy announcement form, it is to be noted if the vacancy is viable or not. Viable means that you would like us to use that vacancy for matching purposes, and if it's not viable, we need to know why it's not viable, right? And there are selections drop downs to choose. Some of the things that we've heard from you that we included was that this is a shared bedroom and you're converting it to a single bedroom, and so you would note that. You could be downsizing the home, you're looking to submit a CON to us and reduce the capacity of the home, and you're taking that vacancy offline, you could select downsizing the home. You're downsizing the staffing ratio for the home, and that's impacting the vacancy. You could note that. The lack of staffing, right? You're not really dropping it, but you don't have the staff to fill the opportunity right now. You would hit lack of staffing. And then planned internal moves. So you have this vacancy, right? But you are intending to move somebody else into that, from your residential portfolio into that home. So you're holding it, and then the true vacancy will be at where that person moves from. If none of these reasons are the reasons you're not filling, but you're still saying that it's non-viable, you must explain in the text box, right? So use the drop downs whenever feasible, but if there's another reason that's not here, please explain it in the text box. So if the vacancy announcement is replacing a previously announced vacancy due to internal move, identify yes on the next box, right? And then type the street address of the vacancy it replaces, right? So you would indicate the officer and the date of the original vacancy that this one is replacing. For the specific vacancy, the following information needs to be included. We need to know if it's a single or shared opportunity. Again, this helps with our matching features of who we're going to send you to screen. We also need to know what floor the bedroom is on that is vacant. Is it on the basement? We give you from the basement to 11 plus floors to choose from. So, if it's above the 11th floor, just hit the 11 plus. We know that it's not on the level and it's up there. If the vacancy is gender specific, we like to know that, or gender neutral, that it's open to all genders. That will be really important. And then there's availability to provide additional information that you feel that we haven't covered and is noteworthy. Lastly, the name of the person completing the form, their phone number and email should be included. And until this capacity management application becomes available to providers, these forms will need to be submitted and submitted to the OPWD team mailbox, the housing mailboxes for the respective regions. The information regarding why a vacancy is viable or not is critical for strategic planning, and understanding the specificity of viable vacancies is also critical for targeted referrals and timely placement. Prior to moving to the next slide, the next topic, we want to reiterate that the vacancy announcements are needed for any and all vacant opportunities, with the exceptions of the CRPs, right, which are part of the SED footprint. So any vacancies that are not CRPs are expected to be submitted within 5 days of becoming open. For current vacancies not filled, similar to site profiles, we're asking you to submit them beginning in March 3rd, 2025 through June 30th. So we gather the current ones that are out there. All right, we can move to the next slide. All right, gonna take another sip of water. All right, so as I mentioned, there has been some changes with internal moves in the CRO ADM, and I want to cover these changes now. First, the H002 form will now be both the internal move notification and the request for approval to fill form, right? We have combined the two forms into one, and the H002 is both the request to fill and the internal move notification. We will review the specific form itself momentarily, but before we get into how to complete the form, I want to spend some time on the CRO ADM rules changes to providers that you'll need to adhere to beginning on March 3rd. So first, all internal moves must be submitted using the H002 internal move form, right? And an internal move form that is the same certification type or less restrictive in nature than its current certification type only requires us to be notified, right? You need to let us know. We're not approving them, but we need to be aware of them, and when you submit it, you should also be submitting the due process notification letter that you're giving to the person to make a determination if they want to move, right? And that is sent to the regional field office with the H002 form, right? So even someone that's living in your home, if they move to another home in your certified footprint, they are entitled to due process rights, right? And you need to give them to that, and we need to see that letter with the internal move form, and we will hold processing of DDP-1 until we have that, right? So we need that information. But if they are the same in nature, like you're going from supervised to supervised, ICF to ICF, supportive to supportive, family care to another family care, it is just notification with a due process letter. But if you are the move is requiring someone to go to a more restrictive, right? If they're going from a supervised to an ICF, if they're going from a supportive to a supervised, you would need our approval. Okay, that is beyond being notified. That requires the regional field office to review and approve that placement. And in those cases, you should submit a draft due process letter, right? So we can review it that it's the right letter, but you do not want to send it to the person until you have our approval. That's really important. The other thing I wanted to say is that the other time that we need to approve an internal move is if the person is changing a district or region from the original provider. That requires the regional field office to approve. So if you are, moving from the Bronx to the Queens, if you are moving from Broome District to Central New York District, right, you are moving from Region 3 to Region 4, any of those kind of situations, they require our approval, okay? So now that I covered that, I think we can get into the form itself and go through that. And I'll wait for it to get this up. So first thing on the form, as I said, it's a twofer, right? It's an internal move, and it's a request to fill. So the first thing you're going to do is you'll be identifying which it is, and we're going to focus on internal moves right now. Then you require information on the person you selected to place, including their name, their TABS ID, their current address where they are living, and the home that you want to place them, their address and OPSERT, right? So we want to know where they are now and where you are. That due process letter is telling them where they're going to move to and their OPSERT. Again, you'll include the provider's, your residential provider name, a staff that we can contact with questions, their phone number, and the date of completion. If if the CRO packet is active on the CRO list, we need to know that. If the placement is to be filled in a current vacancy, anticipated vacancy, and the proposed move date. So we want to know not only that you want to move them, but when you're proposing to move them, right? And and if it's a vacancy that is currently available or one that's going to be coming up in the near future. An anticipated vacancy, should be in something that can be predicted, in some manner. We don't define that more than that, but, we wouldn't want people to say, like, an anticipated vacancy that they have no sense that there's going to be an opportunity there, right? That's not an anticipated vacancy. If the person is not coming from a certified setting, right, you would know yes, and that the person is moving from an uncertified setting. This is really pertains more to, like, requests to fills. If the answer is yes, when they move, you must notify MHLS after they move is approved by the regional field office and the person is placed via the DDP-1. So mental hygiene legal services is required to support and give rights to people in certified residential, and they need to be notified of anybody new moving into certified residential, and that is an obligation that you have as a residential provider. If this is an internal move, you need to identify the proposed move date, and if the move will be affecting another vacancy. So if they will be moving from an internal move, we need to know if a new vacancy will be created, and if the answer is yes, then you need to complete another vacancy announcement, right? There is a reminder on the form for, just to help you that due process notification letters need to be submitted with the internal or request to fill form by checking the box yes. You're saying that you do that. And this is, again, until the capacity management goes live. These forms, both the forms and the due process notification letters, need to be submitted to the regional field office through their respective certified housing team mailboxes. And the certified housing team will approve or not approve the placements for those coming from the certified residential opportunity list and those internal moves that are out of district or region, or internal moves that are moving from moving to a more restricted setting. If you do not approve the move to the provider, you can ask for dispute resolution, which will be covered later in the training. So if we say we're not approving it, you do have rights to inquire and ask us to reconsider with more information, right? And we'll get into the dispute resolution on that a little bit later. All right, so next slide.
Wait, next slide or page? You want to go back to the deck?
Want to go back to reviewing this?
Yes, back to the deck.
Okay, thank you.
That's what, yes. Yep. So then we can go to the next slide, 41. Yep, we're on it. Okay. Okay, so on here, reviewing and screening people on the EN list. So as we mentioned, and we went through the categories, you can see why when a person does not have a home, their family is incapacitated, that's caring for them, why they are prioritized for placement. So when reviewing the list, we will aid in the responsiveness of when a person's needs change or when a new person is added to the list. We want you, through, and we share these at AROC meetings, we share the list with you on a regular basis. We want you to have working knowledge of people on the emergency need list, because it'll help you with your response time when vacancy occurs. You always have availability of that list, the emergency needs list, and it'll either be supplied by us, the regional field office, on a regular cadence, on a monthly basis, or when the capacity management application is fully functional, you'll be able to pull the list directly from there at any time you would like. As with it is today, you can always request to screen anybody on the emergency need list, if you would like to. Or there will be targeted matched referrals that will come from the regional field office, you know, and those, you know, and then we'll be asking you to screen, complete a screening report, and known as the H003. So if you ask to screen or we ask you to screen, you know, the screening report is what we will be covering. The next slide. So once the capacity management is live, from the emergency needs list, right, we're at the right place, yeah, we're on 42, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Targeted referrals will be automated, and this will be a time saver, right? And we'll talk about the timeline when the capacity management application will be available a little later, but it will, you know, it'll take all that information that you've been providing on your site profiles, on your vacancy announcements, and on what care managers have submitted with the H005, and look for targeted matches. And this will, you know, make the screenings more meaningful and reduce really unnecessary, you know, non-viable screenings. So targeted referrals are people, like I said, who are on the H005 required for housing consideration that match the specification of your site profile and vacancy announcements on file. The targeted referrals will be sent from the certified housing team through the capacity management application when it becomes available, or through email until such time. For every targeted referral that is sent to you as a provider, you are required to complete a screening report, or H003. For recollection purposes, a screening report, or the H003, should be completed within 14 days of getting that targeted referral, and then the provider has another 14 days to submit it for submission. So in total, 28 days. But you know, we want to make sure that you understand the timeline for that. So next slide. So, so providers will look at the EN for potential matches, and they'll send those screenings announcements for potential viable matches to us. And if they prove unsuccessful, you know, those targeted matches, it will allow you to move to the substantial need. So I want to be clear, we are not asking a provider to screen every person on the emergency need list for every one of their vacancies. That is not a true statement. If we had a poll here, the answer to that question would be false, right? But what we're saying is that for those that are matched, those are targeted matches based on the information you provided us and based on the H005, we need a screening announcement. And if those are unsuccessful and we get those screening announcements back, then there is the ability to move to the substantial needs list. And that same, you know, expectation, matches from the targeted matches from the substantial need list, you would be expected to screen those targeted matches, and when they are, if they prove unsuccessful, then you would be allowed to go to the current need list, right? And so again, this was being responsive to the feedback about, you know, having to screen people that really didn't match, you know, really didn't, and we want your time and your attention to this to be meaningful, so we made that modification. So when the CMA goes live, with upload the site profiles and current vacancy announcements, those target matches will only be the ones that you need to do, right? And if they do not lead to placement, you'll be able to move to the next categories. Again, I hope as we're going through these that people understand the importance of completing these forms. If you do not complete the site profiles or you do not complete the vacancy announcements, you will get more screening reports, and the expectations will be there because we will have to make assumptions, right? So we're all partners in this, and we're really trying to make it as efficient for you, but it requires having that initial upload of information, and that's why we're giving 4 months to, you know, get those in, because we know it will take time. All right, so let's move to the next slide. All right, so we're going to review the H003 and so let's pull that one up, and then I'll come back and cover the slide. This time, I'm gonna mix it up a little bit. I'll wait for you to get up. There we go. All right, first you'll need to indicate the name of the person you're submitting the screening report for and their TAS number. You'll see that kind of a trend here with our forms. The next is including the CCO, care manager, and their phone number and email. You'll want to include that information as part of the screening. And this is because, and this is if they have a care manager. So like for an ICF, you could put the QIDP there, right? This, having this, they should be helping you coordinate the screening, getting the person there. So it's important for you to know who you're working with. We want to make sure they're being responsive to you meeting the timelines, right? If they're not being responsive, we can help with that as well. You'll include your agency name, the person to contact if there's questions about the rescreening report, their phone number and email address. You'll also know who is completing the form and the date they completed it and their phone number and email address. We didn't want to assume that the person that we would call about questions would be the same person that's completing the form. Sometimes those are two different people, so that's why we ask those two different questions. You'll enter the appropriate region, which you'll be submitting the screening report form, and that should be the regional field office where the home is located. After including the general information, you'll provide information on which home you considered the person form, and you will see that this form has been modified, guess what, by feedback you gave to us, which allows you to provide multiple homes in which you have considered the person for, because you guys let us know. It's like, and it made a lot of sense. We appreciated the feedback that, you might screen someone for 5 or 6 vacancies you had, and you had to do 5 or 6 separate forms, and that was time intensive for you. So we modified the form so you can submit for up to 5 screenings on one form, right? And it reduces multiple H003s being submitted. So for each of the sites, you'll see this repeated on this one form, but for each of the sites that you screen the person for, you will indicate the date you screened them, okay? You will, if the current vacancy is, current vacancy or anticipated, if it's a backfill, will result in an internal move, and or if it's a response to an LOI, like maybe you submitted an LOI for age out. If this is a vacancy for that or an expansion, you would note the type of vacancy they're moving into. You would include both their OC number and their street address. You'll include what region the vacancy is located, and if it's an anticipated vacancy, the date that you anticipate it to be available. You'll let us know the type of screening, and in most cases this should be in person, but it could be video and virtual or paper screening as well, and we like to know which one it is. If the person is appropriate and the person is interested in this opportunity, okay, you haven't made an offer yet, but when you're screening, you kind of get a sense if they like what they're looking at, right? If they did, you would check 1A, and we would be expecting the request to fill or internal move, that H002, to also be completed, right? So if you're saying they're appropriate and they're interested, the next thing we're going to be looking for is that H002. But sometimes you find them appropriate, but the person is not interested, right? They decline. In those cases, you would hit 1B. Like when they're like, it's a nice house, but it ain't for me, right? And you thought they would be appropriate, you would hit 1B here. And in these cases, we want to know why they declined it. And you can choose from, a couple of options here. Maybe they didn't want it because it wasn't in their preferred geographic location. Like they'll say, no, I don't want to live in the city, or I don't want to live in a rural area, or I want something in Hudson Valley and not in Taconic, right? You would hit, they didn't want it wasn't their preferred geographic location. Or it was a shared bedroom and they want a single. They didn't put that on their H005, but when they went to see it, they said, we want a single. We want to know that. Maybe they didn't like the peer group in the home, and we'd like to understand that. Or if there was too many or not enough people living in the home. If none of these options are why they're saying they're not interested, you can choose other, and then we would expect you to type the reason for it that they told you in the text box, right? But this will help us improve their H005. We can follow up with a care manager. It also lets us know what people are looking for. Like, so if we decide to do an RFP or an LOI, all this information will drive meaningful development, right? So there's so many reasons why we're asking these questions, and it's not just to get information, but it's so we make meaningful decisions that help all of us, right? And mostly the people seeking housing. So the next, if the resident is not appropriate, like that you didn't feel it was appropriate for them, right? It had, you would check number 2 and identify the reason why you felt that the person wouldn't be someone that you were going to make an offer to. And that's because maybe you felt the peer group didn't work, right? That would be one of the options you could choose. Or that they need gender-specific staff and they are unavailable in this home, or their needs that exceed the staffing minimums, or that you feel that they, the home didn't have the clinical supports necessary to support them. And if these aren't the reasons why you're saying that it's not appropriate, you would include that in by checking other and including it in the text box as well. The last option here, if you don't know, right? Sometimes you tried your dickens to get them to screen, but when you're trying to contact them, the family says, or the person says, I know I said I wanted this, but I'm not coming for the screening. I don't want to come. So you don't know if you could serve them or not. You would hit undetermined, and you would say that the family or person refused the screening. There might be that you've been trying multiple times to make contact in that 14 days, right? And no one's returning your phone call. You could indicate that you've tried multiple times, and you can't make a connection, so you don't know. And if there's another reason that we haven't thought about it, you again could hit other and explain it in the text box. And for one person, you'll see this form goes down. It gives you those same questions for 5 different houses, right? So you could put that same information for multiple houses on this one form. And then you would submit that to the appropriate CRO mailbox. And then when the CMA goes live, you would be completing this information right in the capacity management application. So let's go back to our slides. Stay on slide 44, I believe. Is that where we are? Mm-hmm. Yep. Let me see here. I can't see it. Which one are we on? Okay. So, how does this work? We get the CRO packet from either an ICF provider or the care managers, and that's how it starts, right? Once we have it, the capacity management application or our certified housing team, we go to look for targeted matches and from what they submitted in your site profiles and vacancies, and we provide you with targeted matches for those opportunities. And then you would receive them, and again, just to highlight, our expectation is that you have 14 days to complete the screening, and then another 14 to complete the forms and submit it to the RFO. So in total time, again, you have 28 days to submit the screening report back to us from when we send you a targeted referral. All right, next slide. That's on me as well. So, let me see over here. So as we indicated on the screening report, for those screens where 1A is chosen, appropriate and the person is interested, it is expected that a request to fill H002 is submitted within 2 calendar days If this is an internal move, and a due process letter should be submitted with the H002. If it's a request to fill, you should be submitting a draft due process letter. The RFO certified housing team will review and approve upon receipt of approval, then you would present the due process letter to the person and family. And I think I am done with my section. Huh? Oh, one of the things, so thank you. There was a question, I think, in the chat box specific to people coming from residential schools and the adult service plan. So if when we get a request to fill and we get these forms through the CRO, our housing teams are connected with our RSTCs. And for those that are coming from residential schools, the adult service plan will be an additional document that needs to be completed, you know, and there's additional steps. Today we're covering the CRO ADM, so we didn't roll in the unique, you know, requirements for those coming from residential schools, but they still apply. We would, you know, we would expect the vacancy announcements and the request to fill to be used for them, but then we would also coordinate those other activities.
Thank you, Anne Marie.
Thank you.
So we can move to the next slide. So I'm going to cover Section 8, due process requirements. Thank you. So we talked a little bit about this. It was kind of sprinkled in throughout the presentation, right? And as you all know, residential providers are required to follow due process and community placement procedures, right, in accordance with 633.12, and the Community Placement Procedures Handbook. Some of you may affectionately know it as the Green Book. And this really applies for any proposed relocation, a planned internal move, interdistrict transfer, or any discharges. I do want to stress that if a person is a member of the Willowbrook class, the care manager is the person responsible for completing the due process letter, not the residential provider. For all other people, the residential provider operating the residence from which the person is moving is responsible for the relocation notifications. Another reason that due process requirements exist is for the NOD 15s that will be issued that provides a determination of the need for certified housing. Okay, we can move to the next slide. So let's review the flow a little bit here. So when there's a move, again, a relocation or discharge notification, there's a requirement for the due process letter, right? All relocations, discharge notifications, they're sent to the people that are actually receiving the services, you know, their circle of support, their guardians, advocates, family, as well as MHLS. The same applies for internal moves, but I just want to stress that those have to be sent as well to the relevant certified housing team and the relevant regional field office directors, okay? So for internal moves, the residential providers must submit a copy of the relocation notification with the H002, which is the request to fill, and that will be sent to our certified housing team. Okay, so let's move on to dispute resolution, which is a different process. Thank you. So I shared the criteria for due process, but I want to ensure that you understand that there's a difference between due process and dispute resolution, right? So due process, you know, placement notification, those are required again for moves, relocations, discharges, but dispute resolutions, that is reserved for when a person who's receiving services or, key here, or the residential provider disagrees with a decision or action that's taken by the certified housing team, except determinations that a person does not have a demonstrated need for residential services in that facility, certified or operated by OPWDD. So let's continue to explore this a little bit. We'll go to the next slide. So here's some key facts that outline the dispute resolution process. So a party who objects to a decision or action taken by the certified housing team may submit a written request for reconsideration that briefly explains what the central issue is. You know, what was the decision or action that was taken by the certified housing team, and also what are those specific reasons for asserting that that decision should be modified. So the written request would be sent to the regional field office director via email within 30 days of receiving the action taken by the certified housing team. If that objecting party isn't satisfied with the regional field office director's decision and they decide that they want to appeal it, the written appeal must be made to the commissioner of OPWDD or their designee by 14 days of receiving the regional field office director's decision. The commissioner or their designee will review that administrative record and issue a written decision. And next slide. So let's just review one more time to provide some clarity. Those decisions that are not fair hearable, such as a disagreement with an approval to fill, can be disputed by appropriate parties. Those disputes need to be received within 30 days of that decision. They're sent via email or a letter to the regional field office with attention to the director. As shown here, the director will review the material that inform the original decision. They may decide to meet with the objecting party, and they will send a determination if they're going to uphold the original decision or overturn it, and they'll provide a formal letter to the objecting party. If they overturn the decision, a new H002 will be sent, and if they uphold the decision, the objecting party can still ask for that administrative review if they're still not satisfied. So next slide. So here, you'll see the same graphic for the administrative review. Again, after they get the decision, within 14 days, they provide a request for an administrative review to the commissioner designee. The commissioner reviews the determination and decides whether the declaration should be modified. They then send a determination letter, and then the regional field office sends a new H002 if a request to fill was to be modified. Okay, so now we're going to move on to section 10. Take it away, Cindy.
I'm back, and I am wrapping up the ADM. Next slide, please. So let's keep records. Yes, we should keep records for at least 10 years. This includes documents for people who are involved in the CRO process and or have decided to decline residential support. And Anne Marie goes on next.
All right. Hold on. Video. There. All right. So now that we have reviewed the CRO ADM, we would like to review the IT system that we're building to support the CRO regulation. And the IT system that we've been developing, you've heard me mention a few times today, is called the Capacity Management Application. So we can go to the next slide. So the Capacity Management Application, and for those of us that like to use acronyms, the CMA, is built within the Microsoft Dynamics platform. And it's the same place that we build the choices, database that you all use. But it is not in choices, but it's in the same application, and it's where we'll be maintaining all the data on certified housing, and where we'll automate all the functions that we manually do and you manually do, and that we submit back and forth to email. When the capacity management application is totally operational, all those emails, et cetera, and paper forms will go away. So we will be rolling this out in 3 phases. The first phase we anticipate beginning in the spring of 2025, and it will address all of the care manager's tasks associating with the referral application. The second phase, which is the electronic submission of site profiles and vacancy announcements, we estimate that that will begin in fall of 2025. the capacity management application, like I said, being in the dynamic platform, you sign in just like you would for choices when it would be available. And instead of choosing choices, you would choose the CMA application, and then all the forms and all the information that you would need would be there. So next slide. So again, there are many stakeholders that will use the capacity management application and pull information from it. Care coordination organizations, you as residential providers, including our state operations team, and then OPWD personnel staff, including us at the regional field office, will be accessing and working within the application. As stated previously, this application is aimed to improve efficiency with implementing the CRO ADM, improve reliability of data, increase accountability that will ultimately lead to more timely and appropriate placements for those in need of certified housing. We will initiate the process using the capacity management application by first testing and then training each of the phases with their intended users and how it works, right? So when it's, our first testing and training will be with the CCOs because that'll be the part of the first phase. But please note that we'll be working with your provider associations and executive directors when the time comes to have testers to test your portion of it. And then we'll have additional training on how to actually use the application, right? So everything you learned today, we'll be teaching you how it's automated and how you'll enter that in the application when it is tested and ready for you. And we'll also be providing demonstration and user guides, so you'll have a lot of tools. So don't be intimidated. More to come, and a lot more support to be given. So let's look. The next thing I want to kind of show you guys is just kind of how the CRO ADM and that capacity management application timeline looks. And so we can go to the next slide. All right, so this slide has a lot of information on it, but it shows you the timeline of activity that will be happening throughout 2025 and into 2026. Again, we have a phased-in approach to allow everyone the opportunity to acclimate themselves to both the CRO ADM and the new system built around it. You will see that we issued the CRO ADM on December 19th on this slide, and then today's the second date training specific to the CRO ADM. So, as stated earlier, all the new CRO forms will begin on March 3rd, 2025. We talked about that. Prior to the first phase of the CMA going live in spring, we will be doing testing. I mentioned that, both with the regional field office staff and the CCOs. Then in the fall, we will be working with all the current people on CRO. By the fall coming around, everybody that is currently today on CRO and anybody new coming in will be within the capacity management application. And we will be having care managers and ICF providers will be updating their packets, so we make sure that we have current information in. So by the fall, you can be assured that all referral packets will be current that you receive. Then we will initiate phase 2, and this is really a lot of what we were talking about today with you guys. And that phase will be really primarily with you as residential providers, including state operations. This is where we'll go from the manual submission of site profile and vacancy to an automated one within the capacity management application. And that will continue going, that'll continue through the winter of 2025, where we'll have all current vacancies and all up-to-date site profiles within the capacity management application. And again, as I mentioned, prior to it going live, there will be testing and additional training provided to you. With phase 3, this is really where it all comes together, and that matching capability where, that you will get, matches that are pulled right from, the information that you put in the care managers. That'll start to, be fully implemented in the spring of 2026. And it'll be viable for everybody. And, at that time, we'll have, substantial reports that will be useful for both you as providers, and CCOs, as well as the regional field office, and really allow us to, support the here and now and making sure people get placed and do strategic planning for the future. So I'll pause there. We'll pause, we'll see what's in the chat function that we can maybe answer today. And for those that we don't get to, we will send an FAQ. So if you don't mind, we're gonna go on mute and review some information. Thanks. Okay, so the first question was about CRPs and if site profiles are required for them. Site profiles are required for every operating certificate you have. So we will have site profiles on our CRPs. They are required. What is not required for CRPs is they need to announce the vacancies against them. All right, so we do not need vacancy announcements for the CRPs, but we do need site profiles. All right, we're going to go back on mute and see if there's other easy ones to answer. Okay. Okay, so we're going to get into some due process questions. So there was a question that if a person makes the choice to leave a voluntary provider or state operated provider certified residential placement, right? So they're in a supervised IRA and they decide they want to go home and live with their family, and they are driving that decision. Due process rights notifications are not required in those instances. Due process notification rights are required when a certified provider wants a person to consider a move, and that they are asking them to move to a different setting, or they are wanting to discharge them. So if it's driven by the provider, due process rights are afforded to the person. If the person is voluntarily choosing to leave a provider, they do not need to do due process notifications. But in both cases, MHLS needs to be notified, because MHLS writes to, when someone's living in the community, not in a certified setting, MHLS does not have to have oversight over them. So that is important. In either case, MHLS should be notified of the move.
I have another due process question.
Okay.
Who should be signing the due process consent if the individual is not capable and has no advocate?
So, so if a person is not capable of due process notification, and so, I mean, typically, if there should be some form of, oversight over that, and so that would be, I would look to the care coordination organization, because they need someone also to be able to sign their life plans. MHLS should be involved in that, right? There's an advocate there, but, that someone has to sign their life plan, and I'm thinking that if, that is where I would look for that. Typically, a person is capable, and there is a different threshold for someone being able to make decisions about, movement and housing, and then other decisions. And so, typically in a life plan, it'll talk about that they might not have capabilities, on like a surgery per se, but they could tell you if they like living someplace or not, right? And so that threshold is different when it comes to movement, but your care management organization should be the driver of that, that question.
All right, we're gonna put ourselves on mute.
So there was a question, about will the due process notification forms be shared? They are on our website, so you can find all our due process notification letters. There's a variety of them depending on what it's for. If it's for certified residential, if it's for other waiver services, et cetera. Those are on our website, and they're available to you. There also was a question about, I think, the timeliness of the due process letter. As we said, that if it's one that we need to approve, right, we need the due process letter in all cases, right? So we want it with the H002, either the one that you did for internal moves that do not require our approval, or for those that do we want it in draft. If the bottom line is that we cannot process a DDP-1 ad into your program until we know that the due process notification was given, and a person has 30 days to determine if they accept or want to object to that due process letter. And so, depending on when we get it and the date of it, either we need confirmation that the person accepted it, or we have to wait that 30 days to know that there's no objection. So the time is really dependent on both receiving the letter and then when the letter goes to the person of when we can process the DDP-1 ad. So I think there was a question about how do we notify families of screening when you do screenings and the outcomes of those, right? And that's a great question. So when the capacity management application is in its full capacity, you'll be submitting your screening announcements to us, and we will be, reviewing them, and as they're accepted, they'll be saved into the system. And when they're saved in the system, the CCO will have access to them, and they know that, they'll be able to see for the people that are on their caseload those screening announcements. Until the CMA goes live, you want to make sure that we don't have any questions about the screening report. We will let you know if it's accepted or not. Once we accept it, you're able to communicate the outcome to the care manager in the CCO organization. So, we will go through the rest of the, questions. Like we said at the beginning of this, we will be doing a FAQ, and we will share, the answers to the questions to make sure that those that signed off already, and those that are on receive, the FAQ for a resource. And we will be, sharing the slide deck. You know, we have recorded it today as well. And we just want to thank everybody for your participation here. We hope you found it helpful and useful. And again, more to come. But thank you again, and have a great day. We really appreciated all your feedback, so we could incorporate this in the CRO ADM. And it really is a partnership, and we look forward to working together in the days and months ahead. Have a great new year.
Thank you, everyone. Happy New Year.